So this panel is about Bitcoin and politics. And it's probably going to be quite spicy. I'm going to make sure it's spicy because politics can be seen as boring. Not in the UK. Oi! Boris Johnson, Prime Minister by Friday. How does that grab you? Okay. So I've got Dr. Lisa Cameron. She's an SNP MP at Westminster. Now, Lisa's really interesting in that she's not a career MP that sat on benches. She did 20 years as a clinical psychologist in the NHS, so she understands life. And of course, you know Samson Mow. I loved listening to Samson this morning. He was talking about El Salvador. So let's kick this off a little bit. So, Samson, why should a sovereign government even contemplate Bitcoin as a currency or a store of value?
Well, I think it has to do with foresight. If you're looking at where everything is going today, you're seeing all the fiat currencies starting to melt into oblivion. And you might think, well, the US dollar is strong right now, but it's actually the slowest sinking ship if you zoom out enough. But Bitcoin has held steady. It's at 19K for 5 months now-ish. And you could say it's like a stable coin, but if you just look at the whole environment, Bitcoin is the only reliable form of money out there. And Bitcoin is a replacement for something like gold. So any nation should be looking at a way to maintain security and maintain stability. So Bitcoin is obviously the answer to that question.
Okay, so when you say reliable, so we've got Lisa sitting here and we've had a chat with her before. What do you mean by reliable money, if you were to quantify that?
Well, Bitcoin is sound money, and it is Bitcoin is decentralized.
Let me stop you again. So we use these terms, sound money, and we kind of know that. Can you just break that down for a 5-year-old?
Well, Bitcoin is decentralized money. No one can control it.
Yeah.
It cannot be corrupted. It is immutable, and most importantly, it is permissionless. And the current legacy financial system has none of these attributes whatsoever. So that is why I say Bitcoin is sound money, because it is reliable. You cannot change the protocol. Anybody can access it. And the current financial system is broken on a number of levels. Like, accessibility is one thing. We often talk about banking the unbanked, but things like a central bank digital currency can never bank the unbanked, because the nature of being unbanked is you don't have a fixed address, you don't have a lot of the things that privileged people have that would allow you access to a CBDC, right? But Bitcoin being an open network, anybody can participate and access that. So it's superior in that regard. But in terms of reliability, it's just the concreteness of the protocol, the rules, the 21 million coin cap, blocks every 10 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have this kind of reliability and basically assurance that your money is not going to change. The way we're operating these days is we're watching all the central banks. What are you going to do next? What rate hike are you going to announce? What does the FOMC think today? What does Powell think tomorrow? Like, there is no way to live your life just watching everything and trying to guess what's going to happen next. And you cannot plan for the future if you don't have that reliable foundation to build on, where your money is unchanging and uncorruptible.
Yeah. And that makes me think about how much it costs for a coffee in here. £2.50. Who remembers when a coffee was 20 pence? And that's the bit. So do you, when you listen to Samson come out with that rationale there, what do you think when I say that a coffee was 20p and it's now £2.50, but he's saying that money can't be tampered with, but ours has been inflated away?
Well, I think we know that so many people are struggling now, particularly with inflation, and the economy has been very volatile particularly over the past few months. So those issues are at the forefront of everybody's minds in the cost of living crisis. And, they're impacting mortgages, energy bills. So for an MP, that's, one of the key issues that we're working with currently to try and support constituents right across the United Kingdom to be able to live their everyday lives. So yeah, that's something that we're aware of. In terms of this sector, it's relatively new to many members of the Parliament, and I include myself in that. I got into it through a constituent who had befallen a kind of scam, I suppose, in the sector, and I was looking for who's working on this just now in Parliament. And when we did the research, there wasn't a cross-party or all-party group in the Parliament operating in that time. So we set one up to, educate ourselves. And thank you for having me here, because coming to these events, engaging with people in Bitcoin, in cryptocurrency, in digital assets more broadly, because our all-party group looks at all of those issues, is really helpful for us too, to be able to understand where digital finance and innovation is heading, and also to make sure that when we look at regulation and consumer protection, specifically for people that we represent, which is at the core of what we're trying to do, that we have a good evidence-based approach going forward.
So when I spoke to Adam back last night, and I was talking about this, Bitcoin needs to do more at Westminster. And he came up with a great point. He said to me, well, here's the issue. He said, cryptocurrencies, they create something in Switzerland, they create it, they create a treasury, all of a sudden they give themselves 20 million, and they can then go and influence Parliament, and they're talking about Parliament. So on the committee that you're on, has Bitcoin raised its head, or is it crypto?
Well, what I would say is we've taken, information from a broad range of sources. We have an inquiry currently that I'm leading. I chair the all-party parliamentary group. It's a group that has membership from MPs from the parties right across the House of Commons. We also have input from many key members of the House of Lords, because obviously any regulation which goes through the Parliament will go through both houses. We're looking at the sector as a whole, so we haven't specifically looked at Bitcoin, but we have an inquiry currently into the government's vision of the UK becoming a hub of digital assets and cryptocurrency internationally, what that should look like, the challenges, what we need to be doing in terms of taking forward recommendations. So please do, one of the reasons I come to these events is to say please do reach out to make sure that we're not excluding part of the sector, and coming to speak to MPs is not principally about money or funding. The Parliament is open to the public, and certainly our group is about making sure that we hear the evidence-based practice, and when we have debates in Parliament, when we raise questions to government, that comes from an evidence base, not from perhaps a sensationalist base, as has been in the past. And we're really educating and skilling ourselves up at this point in time. So please do reach out and email me or the all-party parliamentary group for crypto and digital assets directly after today, because this is an ongoing conversation from today, I think.
Skilling up's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So, Samson, if I was to ask you, what are you doing to skill up politicians and leaders across the world?
I would say, echoing some of the discussions this morning, it's education. A different sort of education. It's not like my first Bitcoin, but it's talking to politicians and members of Parliament or Congress or the Senate in different places and trying to make them understand what Bitcoin is. Because there's often a very strong conflation of Bitcoin and crypto. And this is driven in large part by the crypto people, because they want to say, we are like Bitcoin, or we're a better Bitcoin, but they are centralized, and they are just like shadows of Bitcoin at best. And I think this distinction has to be made. And fortunately, in El Salvador, they've made that distinction. President Bukele understands, it's Bitcoin, and they've managed to maintain being Bitcoin only, even despite all the crypto grifters going to El Salvador and trying to push their wares and get some altcoin being listed as legal tender. It hasn't happened. So I think that sort of education is very important because there is a strong, you could say, lobby group, right? All the cryptocurrency projects, they have a large war chest because they sold tokens to the public, and now they can use that to try to make their way into the mainstream.
Do you understand, Lisa, when Samson says that they have a treasury to sell tokens and use that as cash, but Bitcoin has no treasury? Do you understand that difference?
Well, people have been explaining that to me over the past couple of days of engaging with the conference, and these are exactly the examples of, the information that parliamentarians need, because when we, set about starting the group, basically we looked at, who's speaking about this in the Parliament. There were very few questions being raised to government, very few debates had ever been had, and yet millions of people were engaging with this sector, and some of the technological advances as well with Web3 and the blockchain technology, are going to be really formative for the future. We feel that there, will be a positivity in terms of innovation and growth. But what we also want to make sure is, just like my constituents experience, that there's consumer protection involved there, and there's also clarity for business, but a regulatory framework as well. Not just educating MPs. This is what we're doing just now, but we also need to have an education piece for the public as well, so that there are, people make informed decisions about what they're doing, and there's clarity for those who are advertising to sell tokens or, different aspects. So, yeah, we're on that educational curve ourselves. I mean, if I give an example, we had someone in talking about Fiat, to MPs, Fiat's a car. So it's sometimes like a different language, we're getting up to speed with it, but sometimes we do need a glossary of terms.
Yeah. Samson, let me take you to Canada. There's a lot going on in Canada. What happened with the truckers, Trudeau, is it, I'm going to get the guy's name right, is it Paul
Poilievre.
Pierre
Poilievre.
Paul Poilievre?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's such an interesting guy, and he's very articulate. Can you tell me, have you had much to do with him, or what you see in him and the message he's put, how he's articulating that to the Canadian people?
Yeah, so I think his main messaging when he engages in Parliament and delivers his speeches is he's really talking about sound money. And if you listen and read between the lines, it's about Bitcoin. And I know he's talked with a lot of us in the Bitcoin community, but I think some of it is bleeding through, and you can hear the messaging. And I think he's on the right track, and he's got a massive base of support now, just because he's talking about common sense type things, like, for example, Canada should not import oil because we have oil. We have massive amounts of natural resources and energy in Canada. There's no reason to do these wacky policies where we're buying oil from other countries. He's talking about fiscal responsibility. Like, these things are very fundamental, I think, to good government. Like, you cannot just spend indefinitely, which is where we're at today, and we're suffering the consequences of that unbridled spending. And I think the trend is going to be to rectify things and fix things as we go down, and I think Bitcoin is a key component of that. And as you said, Pierre is very articulate, and he knows how to explain things to the masses in a simple, easy to understand manner.
So, Lisa, where would you say right now, if you look at the committee you're on and whatever has taken place so far in terms of its traction and understanding, where does Bitcoin figure in that? Be honest with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to do is have more engagement from this sector, to be honest, so that we do that education piece as well with members of the Parliament across both houses. We do have the inquiry report into the UK government's vision currently ongoing, so we've taken written evidence that's being collated, so I'm not sure how much of that reflects the Bitcoin part of the sector. But I would say engage with that, please do. And we're going to be having our oral evidence sessions in the next couple of months, and then reporting with recommendations at the beginning of next year. So what we want to do is make sure that we're not excluding, parts of the industry or the sector that are key. And we don't have all of the answers just now. We're looking to have that collaboration with industry, collaboration with consumers and with regulators, the FCA, etc., to try and progress these issues in the Parliament. I had a question to Jeremy Hunt on Monday in his economic statement to the House, and we're going to be meeting with the Minister who's currently in place in the next few weeks as well. So we're pushing forward in terms of making sure that we address the key issues constituents are raising: consumer protection, regulation, and that businesses are saying they want regulatory clarity, etc. And I think, obviously coming today is my reach out to make sure that this is also included in the work that we do.
It's interesting that you need the consumer protection because of the shit coins that are out there.
Well,
unfortunately, that's an issue we'll try and fix.
I think the consumer protection is really where MPs feel very, very strongly that we need to focus.
And we talked about Terra Luna, Celsius, all that stuff that went on, leveraging. Oh my God, that's part of the issue. That's part of the problem, and it's part. You called it a sector. Maybe we might call it an industry. The crypto guys might call it a crypto industry, and there's a lot of jobs being created, that sort of stuff.
Well, on the point about regulation, I think it's important, if you're trying to regulate the crypto sector, it has to be broken up sufficiently. Like Bitcoin, I don't think requires regulation. It's just money, and it's in its own league. Then you have cryptocurrencies like those shitcoins, and I think you could regulate that because they're really unlicensed securities, right? There are dev teams and foundations that are directly in control. They're directly managing treasuries, trying to prop themselves up like Terra Luna. So these things are centralized, and they could be regulated. And you could regulate them under the umbrella of securities, or you can create some new framework for that. But that would tie into what you're talking about for consumer protection. But then you have a third bucket, which is stablecoins. I think you could regulate them as well because they are obviously centralized. There is an issuer that is storing funds in some bank somewhere. So I think it has to be a smart structure where you're not, lumping everything into one basket.
Yeah. I guess this is one for both of you, but I'll direct it at Lisa initially. So we heard yesterday that big banks, institutions, they're all sort of gearing up for Bitcoin, that they're putting all the financial plumbing in, they're looking at it. We even had someone from Coots here yesterday was talking about, we're curious and we're sort of getting to that stage. So they're gearing up for it. Are you going to wait do you think Parliament, not you, do you think Parliament's going to wait for banks and these big money brokers to knock on their door and say, right, give us a legislation, or are you being proactive on it?
No, we're absolutely being proactive on it. I think a lot of big banks are already involved in the industry anyway now. That's my understanding. And I know that Bank of England are looking at many of the issues that we're speaking about today. We've had discussions about CBDC, stable coins, etc., moving forward. So we're being very proactive. That's why we have the inquiry report ongoing. We want to push the agenda to get the recommendations needed. But the UK, I think, as a whole, if government's vision is the UK to become a hub of cryptocurrency and digital assets, then we can't be hanging about waiting, because already other jurisdictions are moving ahead quite quickly, and I think we need to continue at pace. That's why government has held the crypto sprint. It's not a crypto crawl, it's a sprint, because we realise that there is some time pressure linked with progress and innovation. And we have fantastic universities right across the UK. We have fantastic innovator hubs and companies, dynamic people who are really taking technology to the next level. And we want to make sure that, we capitalise on all of that. And actually, from speaking to companies, who are very international, the UK itself is a very attractive place to set up business. So we don't want to be chasing people away, and I think we have to be proactive in order to achieve the aims that government has set out.
Great. Samson, any thoughts on globally what you're seeing with the big investment companies and that sort of thing influencing governments, or is it the other way around?
Well, I think favorable conditions are good for business, and we're seeing this happen with El Salvador, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with Bitcoin City, Lisa, but it's basically a special economic region. You can look at it that way. It doesn't need to be a city, like Delaware. No one really cares where your office is in Delaware. But it's a special economic zone with very favorable conditions. There's zero tax on everything and just VAT tax for consumption. But I would say the trend is towards competition for capital, competition for talent, and competition for investment. And adopting a Bitcoin standard is conducive to that, because what you're recognizing is that money is money. If you conflate money with a system of surveillance, you're automatically adding friction to money. And when you have that, you're limiting growth and opportunity. So back when everyone wanted to immigrate to the States, 20, 30 years ago, it's the land of opportunity because it's good for business. You have the same thing with, in the 90s, the Asian tigers. Why were they growing rapidly? Because they're open for business, they're open for investment. So I think accepting Bitcoin as money is the key step, much as El Salvador has done, right? They're basically saying, money is money, we're not using money as a tool for surveillance, we want investment, we want growth, and they're actually seeing the results of that with double-digit GDP growth at a time when the world is failing, and they're buying back their bonds at a time when we're thinking about Western nations defaulting on bonds and just collapsing completely.
That was amazing to hear that statistic this morning, that 28 billion GDP growth, 10% since they've started that off in El Salvador. That's pretty awesome. We could do that here.
Just to link into what's been said there, the MPs and the peers are really interested in the geopolitical aspects of it, and part of the inquiry that we're doing as well is looking at international best practice. So, the UK post-Brexit, whether people voted for or against Brexit, think it's a good idea or not, we are where we are, but it's given the opportunity in this part of the work that we're doing to have a bespoke regime for the UK, and we're very, very interested in, we've had some discussions with other countries, with Switzerland, what's going on in Zug there. We've got discussions with Banque de France. We've got a meeting with legislators from Gibraltar coming up. So we know that there's a lot of work being done right around the world, and we want to look at that as well to make sure that everybody is as informed as possible moving ahead, because to be quite frank, we haven't been, and we don't want to be behind the curve. We want to make sure that when there's this rapid technological explosion, it's almost like another industrial revolution in a sense, but much more than that. And I've been learning so much, this technology is impacting culture, music, art. There's progress being made in terms of aid money. I've had discussions with UNHCR about making sure that finance gets to the most vulnerable, and that we cut out, middle people where corruption can occur along the way. So there's just fantastic potential, and we need to make sure that we're clued up enough to be able to progress that.
I think what we need to do, though, is fix the money. If we fix the money, we can fix the other stuff after it. And I think that's what part of this audience want to see us do. So I said I wouldn't put you on the spot. So I promise I won't put you on the spot, but I need to put you on the spot. So I heard you say earlier on you picked up there's oral findings and discussions taking place at Westminster. Can we get Samson in as part of that on Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, obviously we're having evidence sessions, so we want to hear from, every different part of the industry. So, I'll look through, when we go back, we're collating the written evidence. It's been an open call for evidence, so I don't know how many submissions link with Bitcoin particularly. I think it'd be quite wide-ranging across the sector or industry in general, but I don't know the results or the outcomes as yet. We're assimilating that. But there's no reason why we couldn't continue the dialogue after today. And I think from what I've learned this week, and thank you for coming to Scotland, by the way, as well. I'm very pleased to be here and in my home turf speaking about these issues, and for Scotland to be part of this discussion and leading on it as well. We want to have as many influential experts as possible involved, and as well as we've also reached out to public. So it's very, very open, and we want to take it forward with a real cross-section. Yeah.
So we're going to make that happen.
All right.
We're going to make that happen.
All right.
It's really brave of Lisa to come here today. So I tried to get the Scottish Government to come here today. Not interested. So I just think it's really brave of her to come and to listen and to be part of this audience. And I know that she'll go away, she'll digest it, and she'll take action. So I know this will happen. I just know it'll happen.
The biggest takeaway is it's Bitcoin, not blockchain, not crypto.
Yeah.
Well, we are looking at all of these issues and upskilling ourselves in them all. So, but I certainly think that Bitcoin should be part of that conversation, and we have to have the knowledge. And part of it is, and I did say it's almost like a different language in a glossary. Part of it is we've had to learn about what CBDC is, what stablecoin is, what the tokens are, how that how that's been sort of unregulated currently, but how it could be regulated, and all of those aspects of things that are actually going on in the communities right across the UK. And people had said to me, well, because at the start, some of the members of Parliament were very sceptical and said, well, we don't need to have any of this here. But, we've already got it all happening. We can't turn back time. So they were astounded by the number of people who are engaged in these industries. And I think the penny has dropped, that we know that we need to be ahead of the curve rather than behind.
So we've got a couple of minutes. I wanted to pick up, I had written down central bank digital currencies, but you kind of brought it up. Mm-hmm. Samson, without going into Greg false expletives on central bank digital currencies, tell us what your view on them.
Well, a central bank digital currency is really, it's nothing innovative. You already have digital money, like PayPal, Venmo, et cetera, Money has been digitized for a very long time. And even when we talk about money printing and money printer go burr, it's figurative, it's not literal, right? They just push a button. It's more like a click, not a burr. So there's no physical paper printing involved. But a central bank digital currency is not a good thing, because you're giving too much power to the central bank. The ability to freeze money, so we've gone through this in Canada, actually. There's a case study to be had here. So the government wanted to freeze bank accounts, but they cannot do it directly. They at least have to go to the banks and say, freeze so-and-so's bank accounts because they're a terrorist. And then, eventually everyone's a terrorist, because once you're not in line with the main view, then you're automatically an outcast. But at least they had to go through one step down to the banks and say, do this. But if you remove that, the central bank is already basically the ATM of the government. When they want to do something or have some initiative or some bailout, they just say, hey, can we have some money? They get it automatically. So now you remove that one step and you've moved the control up directly to the government, and they can automatically freeze. And that is very bad for any liberal democracy, because without free speech, without money, there's nothing there. It's no hope. You're just a dictatorship or a totalitarian regime.
Final question to put that into perspective in a practical reality. Lisa, if I say to you, you get a note from the central bank or the government essentially saying, you've spent too much in washing powder this week, we'd like you to spend more on wine, but you need washing powder, but they're telling you to buy wine. How do you feel about that? I'll just leave that hanging there.
How do they know I've spent so much on wine?
Dr. Lisa Cameron, Samson Mow.